So today we are talking about relocation slash immigration, frequently asked questions. We're about to get into it. Yesterday we talked about, what was it? Oh, yesterday we talked about bond laddering and how to sustain yourself without having to work after relocating. Today we're talking about the different classes of relocation that are available. I only drink one coffee a day these days, but that's it. All right. So, um, immigration classes. You have to work backwards from your end goal to choose the right immigration class. Okay. So you have to work backwards from your end goal to choose the right immigration class. If your end goal, for example, is to come to Kenya and start a business, all right, we have tons of clients that's the end goal. Come to Kenya, I'm going to start a business. Maybe it's a business that's going to export back to the United States or whatever. So I'm going to create a supply chain back to whatever's happening in the United States and gain some control over my supply chain, which isn't a bad idea. If that's the case, then the immigration permit that you would focus on would be an investor's permit, right? We had a client that worked for Ashley's Furniture in a manufacturing plant for Ashley's Furniture. And so he wanted to come here. He ended up transferring into the sales side of Ashley's Furniture. And then there's someone here who kind of like franchised through Ashley's to be able to use their name and sell their furniture here in Kenya. So he was actually able to essentially transfer on the sales side within that company, right? So technically, that's the cheapest way to immigrate because that company should be paying for everything. If someone's offering you a work permit, which is what that would be, and they're asking for money from you, they're probably scamming you, right? So if it's a work permit, the employer is paying for everything and handling all the legal when it comes to that work permit. You cannot open your own company and give yourself a work permit. All right. It might work depending on the connections of the person who's bullshitting you, but when you have to renew it, it'll all fall apart. Okay. So work permits are for when you're hired by local Kenyan firms, businesses, so on and so forth, and they handle everything, right? So you shouldn't be handling anything to do with immigration. They might require you to get your own plane ticket or something, but they should be handling everything when it comes to the immigration side of that permit, okay? If you are the one running the business and know you can't start a business on a work permit, then you would need an investor permit. Okay, investor permits are not for stocks and bonds. Investor permits are for creating a business. All right, so those are two goals. One goal is to work within the company, and you need to get hired in advance, essentially, and then the company will handle a work permit for you. The other goal is to open your own business, in which case you would then need an investor permit, and you have to handle that, which is what firms like our firm handle for people. The next goal is to retire, right? Or to live off dividends like we were talking about yesterday and not have to work anymore, right? And do something like that. In that case, where you're not actively working, you can do an ordinary residency permit. Now, it's okay to still have active employment outside of the country and have an ordinary residency permit. But you would do an ordinary residency permit, and then that would allow you to come in here with no connection whatsoever to employment. Okay. Now, if you were going to actively work directly from Kenya and you weren't going to be here long, right, which is really the kicker, that you're not going to be here long, right? 2 years, maybe 4 years, but not super long. Then there's a digital nomad permit. The digital nomad permit is more cost effective from the position of I'm not going to be here long, right? So then you don't pay as much for the permit as someone who might be coming here permanently. So it's kind of a non-immigrant permit, right? Where the others can be immigrant permits. Work permits are typically non-immigrant as well, by classification. But your all your other permits lead to possibly permanent residency. The digital nomad is like, it's brand new. So really no one knows, right? So if anybody's telling you that they know that it doesn't or they know that it does, they're lying. It's brand new. This is the first year it existed. All right, so no one's gotten to the point where they qualify for permanent residency yet. So we don't know how that works. But because it's supposed to be for a nomadic person, that might be the argument that the state makes if you do apply for permanent residency off of a digital nomad permit. It might be like, well, wait a minute, I thought you were a nomad. Aren't you going somewhere else? Why do you need permanent residency here? Okay, that might end up being the case. No one knows yet because this is the first year in existence that the digital nomad permit has actually existed. So there's that. Now, back to the other permits. With the exception of the ordinary residency permit, none of those permits will lead directly to dual citizenship. All right. Hey, Ryan, are you at a restaurant? No, I'm at my house. So none of those permits will lead to dual citizenship directly, except for an ordinary residency permit. All right. An investor's permit will lead to permanent residency, and a work permit can lead to permanent residency. Okay. The only two permits that lead specifically to dual citizenship is Class K ordinary residency, and the other one is a spousal dependent pass, right? So if you're married, after 7 years, it would lead to dual citizenship. And if you have a Class K ordinary residency permit, after 7 years, that would also lead to dual citizenship, okay? If you have a investor permit or a work permit or a NGO permit or a miner's permit or any of the other permits, after 7 years, you would qualify for permanent residency. Okay, it's not guaranteed, right? All immigration processes are not guaranteed because you don't have a right to immigrate into anyone's country, right? The rights hit after you get your citizenship. So once your dual citizenship hits and you have both passports, that's when the rights hit. But you do not have a right to be in anyone else's country. So at any point in time in the process, if you rub them the wrong way, which typically means like committing crime, then they may just withdraw you from the process as a whole. All right. That's universal, typically in every country. If you make trouble in the country, then they're not going to make you a citizen. Probably not even going to give you residency. All right. Any questions on that so far? All right, cool. Let's get into the requirements. Class K, ordinary residency permit. The requirements are that you need to be able to prove that you make $24,000 a year, US dollars. You need to be 35 years old or older, all right, which means that the people who call it a retirement visa are wrong. It's not a visa at all. It's a permit. And the people who call it a retirement permit are wrong, right? The age limit is 35, not 65. It's not a retirement anything. The reason why people make that era, however, is because if you're retired and American, right? It's not just a shoe-in for retirement. But if you're retired and you're American, typically your retirement meets the qualifications. So if you're retired and you're receiving, pension, 401k, Social Security, all of that, you're typically in that $2,000 a month range, right? And so those people tend to qualify automatically by virtue of their retirement. But it is not a retirement permit, visa, or it's not a visa period, but it's not a retirement permit Retirement isn't a prerequisite for the permit. People just advertise it that way, right? Especially people who don't have a legal team like we do, because the folks who don't have a legal team don't want to deal with any complications, right? So they feel like if they get a retiree, then it's going to be an easy processing and they're not going to deal with complications. And they typically run into complications. It all just says a lot more restrictive than I imagined. Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. I personally appreciate it. It's not a free for all. You have to be able to afford it. You have to be able to meaningfully add something to society, right? Which is great because they're a growing country and they need individuals who are going to help them grow, right? So the folks who advocate for and come here illegally, and which are typically the folks who will tell you to like run across the border every 90 days and that type of nonsense. They typically can't actually afford to be here, and then they're typically a drain because they're not adding anything at all. If they can't afford to be here, they can't afford to open a business. So they're not adding jobs to society. They're not, enriching society in any way, shape, or form. They're just running from something wherever they come from, which sucks. So yeah, I'm not I'm not with the just ridiculous open door type of situation. I don't think it's beneficial, especially if you're in a country where like not everybody is thriving. You know what I mean? You want to get to a point where everybody is thriving, and then maybe you can do stuff like that. But not as a developing nation. Same thing now. We'll move right on to the requirements of the investor permit then, right? So for the investor permit, there is no age requirement. There is no annual income requirement, but it's put up or shut up, right? You're saying that you're a business person. You're saying that you're coming here to open a business. You're saying that you're coming here to hire people. That's what you're telling the government when you apply for an investor permit. So they're not going to play with you. It's put up or shut up. So one of the requirements for the investor permit is that you deposit $100,000 in a bank account in Kenya, right? You also have to create a business, which we handle for our clients. You also have to create a business plan, a legitimate strategic business plan, which we also handle for our clients. So we handle, all of the requirements for our clients who are coming through and getting that, but they're not playing games with people who got businesses on paper or went down to the local Secretary of State and filed for an LLC that ain't doing nothing. They're not playing those games. So if you're getting an investor permit, it's put up or shut up. You either put $100,000 in an account. They don't take the $100,000. They do check. They'll look as a government and make sure it's there. But you put $100,000 in an account, or you get a different permit, right? Which is great because there's a bunch of benefits that come with that are based on the premise that you're going to create jobs for Kenyans. That's the whole point of the investor permit. So if you got some flimsy fake, LLC on paper only, and have never done business a day in your life and are not going to end up employing anybody, can't even keep a business open past a month, you do more damage to the economy than you do, help. And then to have all those incentives then stacked on to a person like that doesn't make any sense at all. So there are tax incentives. There are, all of those things are there. There are tax holidays depending on what kind of business it is that you're building and all of that stuff. So they're, they do make it attractive if you do it the right way, but it's definitely not for fakers, right? So if you're going to enter as a investor permit, you have to be a real entrepreneur, business owner, and or operating investor, right? It's not for stocks and bonds. It's for operating investors, right? So it's for you actually running the business. Okay, so that's the requirements on that side of things. Digital nomad. Digital nomad does not have a income requirement. It used to. So if you're like Googling or something and you get the old information, it's going to say some absurd number that we that we all petitioned immigration to take another look at, which they did. So that's one of the good things about this country is like there are people who just talk, right? And complain and complain and complain. It happens in every country. But what we've noticed is that if you actually do, the country actually listens to you. Now, they don't always do what you say, right? But they do listen. And then they have a system called public participation. And it's just that. It's not citizen participation, it is public participation. And so anyone can participate, where they'll actually take feedback on how laws should work, how rules should work, and all of that. And so that's one of the things that happened with the digital nomad, where the income requirement was higher than like even European countries, right? So we pointed all of those things out. The government took a look at it and was like, oh, yeah, all right. You know, our requirements to get this permit are higher than like places like Singapore, right? Which are obviously doing better and have better incentives for like business owners and especially for wealth generation families than Kenya. So if you can't match the incentives, why would your costs be higher, right? So common sense does prevail, so they remove that. Now, had we sat around on the internet and just complained about it and complained about the government and look, they wouldn't have changed nothing. So there's definitely a difference between the talkers and the doers as far as getting things done in that process. But at least the process exists. There's no such process in the United States. If there's a an IRS rule that doesn't make sense, there's no process for the citizenry to challenge it. And right, you can write up a petition all you want. There's no law that says that excuse me, the secretariat, at the Internal Revenue Service has to read any of that. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where there's not actually a system that functions that way, the same way that public participation functions here. So I definitely appreciate it. Unfortunately, you know, a lot of people are too lazy to utilize it, but it's there. All right. So those are your three basic situations. Now, for the digital nomad, you can be doing business. You can own your own business. You don't have to be like a digital worker. So that's the number one thing that people kind of mess up on that. You can own your own business. You can be a digital worker if that's the case. But you cannot be doing business with Kenyans in Kenya. Like, it's not like if you do business with a Kenyan, but they're an American citizen, but they're like a Kenyan ethnically, that doesn't count. We're talking about within their borders, right? So if you're doing business within their borders, you need an investor permit. That's the point of an investor permit, right? So no business within their borders, but you can be doing business, outside, actively doing business, or you can be working for a company, remotely and all of that stuff. So that's what that permit is essentially made for. So if you have a residency permit, you can also own a business outside, right? So what would be the difference between choosing the digital nomad permit in that case if you're a business owner and the residency permit? The difference is the residency permit is going to lead to dual citizenship. The digital nomad isn't, right? So if dual citizenship is the goal, even if you do want to own a business, right? If dual citizenship is the goal, you need to come in as a residency permit. If that's what matters most, then you got to come in as a residency permit, right? Which means that you either have to hire somebody to run a business for you, and then you own the shares. You can do that. You can't work the business, right? So you can't actively be working that business, but you can own the shares, right? So you can be the president of the board or something, right? You can't get paid for being president of the board, but you can get your dividends as a shareholder, right, of the company. So that's an option. You run your company the same way you're running it now, because if you ain't got an investor's permit, you ain't running no company in Kenya right now anyway, right? So you either just keep running your foreign company and wait, or what we see sometimes is if you're a couple, right? So if you're a married couple and you really want to do that business, but you don't want to do the investor permit, or maybe you don't have the 100,000, right? You do have a legitimate business, but you don't have a ad hoc 100,000. Then some of those clients split it, right? So what ends up happening is the person who's not running the business will get a Class K ordinary residency permit, but they're married. Okay, the person who is running the business will get the investor permit. Okay, so now this person is on the path to dual citizenship. This person is on the path to permanent residency, but they're married. So once this person gets their dual citizenship, which takes 7 years, and this person is now eligible for permanent residency, the other thing that just happened is this person has been married to this brand new Kenyan citizen for 7 years. So instead of applying for permanent residency, they can apply for citizenship by marriage to a Kenyan citizen, right? It's more expensive though, because now both people needed a permit instead of one. If we don't have to do that, both people don't need a permit. One person needs a permit and the other person needs a pass. All right. A pass is an attachment to a permit. Okay. So your kids do not need a permit. Your kids get a pass on your permit. Your spouse does not need a permit. Your spouse gets a pass on your permit. In certain circumstances, your parents do not need a permit. Your parents, depending on the circumstance, get a pass on your permit. You cannot get a pass on your parents' permit, right? Because when I say your kids, I mean children, I mean minors, right? If your parents are elderly, and because they're elderly, they depend on you, which sometimes requires medical, documentation. Then you can say, okay, I'm taking care of my elderly parents, so they're my dependents. So then, they essentially fit in as children almost, right? Again, you have to meet those qualifications. That's not just typical, right? Now, your kids who are minors can be put on your permit. You cannot be put on your elderly parents' permit. You're a grown-up. You're an adult. You need your own permit, right? So that's how that works. We've seen a lot of do-it-yourselfers that mess that up badly, right? So we had an older gentleman who was sick, came with like his whole family. So like it was crazy. It was like 12 of them. They just came over here on some do-it-yourself type stuff. They were living in like a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment. It was horrible. They had an elderly grandmother on dialysis with them, and it was nuts. The elderly father, right, ended up getting a permit. He ended up doing it himself. Guess what happens when you try to DIY a permit? 90% of the time you get 1 year because the government doesn't trust you. You have no one vouching for you, right? So it's almost like a probationary approval. Here's the problem with getting 1 year. You now need to reapply. You need to renew your permit every year. When you renew your permit every year, that means there's 7 opportunities for them to deny you a renewal. When you deal with a professional, you tend to get a max permit. When you get a max permit, you only renew every 3 years. Here's the other problem with that, though. These people sent a container here before they left and before they came here, right? So this whole group of people, they came here on their own, no professional assistance. The father who leads the family got the permit, which was the dumb thing to do. What should have happened was the daughter should have got the permit. The daughter should have gotten the permit because the daughter had 2, 3 kids, right? Those two, three kids were there. So those two, three kids are automatically dependents on her pass. Her father and her grandmother, the father's mother, were both sick. The grandmother was on dialysis, but the father had diabetes or something, right? So they had the medical paperwork that she could have been taking care of her elderly parent and grandparent. They would have been dependents as well. Let me spell that out in dollars for you. Her max permit would have cost $10,000, right? Each dependent, though, would have only cost like $2,000. Each permit, though, costs another $10,000. So as soon as he got the permit, he might have been able to make his mom a dependent, but everybody else was grown, and the grandkids, you can't make grandkids dependents. So now the daughter had to get a pass. So now we're at 20,000. Whereas before, with everybody in the household getting what they needed, it would have been 16. We're at 20 just for the two. Now grandmom needs one. Now we're at 30. Now the brother needs one. Now we're at 40. And maybe you can still tuck the kids underneath. So now we're at $46,000 because they didn't know what the hell they were doing, right? Beyond that, they sent a container. The container's bill of lading was wrong because they didn't have a professional assist them with the container. The container got stuck at the docks. It couldn't be processed. Then the guy went, and all this happened before they called our law firm, looking for help, because everybody takes it to the extreme until they hit rock bottom, and then they want to call for help. So they did all of this stuff on their own. And so now they got a 1-year permit because they tried to do the permit on their own. Well, the law says in order for you to get a household exemption for shipping, right? So when you ship a container, you can get a one-time household exemption. And that household exemption makes the whole thing tax-free, right? You don't have to pay your income, import taxes or any of that. Has to be the stuff from your household. It can't be brand new stuff. Has to be you took your microwave, you took your, Keurig, you took all your stuff out of your house, put it in a container, and moved it with you. Okay, great. We get you an exemption. You need a 2-year permit minimum in order to qualify for that exemption. So now, by trying to save a penny and do it himself, he actually barred himself from the exemption. Now you got to pay all the import taxes on everything that was in that container, and the bill of lading on the container is wrong. So now they need to do a security inspection on the container. Grandma's in dialysis. Remember, she's in dialysis. So guess what kind of medication is in that container? Narcotic medication. You think that was listed when they didn't use a professional? Nope, wasn't on the manifest or the bill of lading. So now they're looking at it like these people are drug dealers, So this is the kind of nonsense that people can get themselves wrapped into when they try to perform, a legal procedure. Immigration in every country is a legal procedure. It's a court proceeding, right? By themselves, right? So they're back in the United States. We got the container out for them, which took us forever. But we got the container out. It was expensive. Anytime you're doing something backwards and you're doing it, the wrong way, it gets expensive quick. So they did not last. So they're back in Texas or wherever they came from. Right? But we get a lot of calls like that on the back end. And here's the crazy thing. In order for us to get that call, it means they saw us before they acted. So it means that they were following. It means that they were looking at lives like this. They were trying to gather information because we don't advertise like that. So for you to get in trouble and then call our law firm and try to get our law firm to get you out of trouble, that means that you had the opportunity to do it the right way and chose not to. So it's always, sucky when that happens, but people are truly hard-headed. Like, there are some really hard-headed folks out there. Please don't be one of them hard-headed folks. If you're going anywhere in the world, just get the professional to help you, to help you do that. Don't be one of those folks. All right. Are you a lawyer also, or you just work closely with or employ a law firm? I own a law firm, right? So remember, I was just talking about that whole thing about you can buy the shares of the company. Now, there are public shares, which is like stock market, and there are private shares. Most law firms are not publicly traded, right? But you can buy anything that's for sale. So you can. The next thing we're looking to build is a hospital. I'm not a doctor either, but I'll own that hospital. So it's one of those things where vertical integration typically helps any business. Vertical integration means that the things you need to offer services to your clients, you end up buying along the way, right? You're vertically integrated. So we're vertically integrated with our immigration lawyer. We're vertically integrated with estate planning through the same law firm. We're vertically integrated with an architectural firm that we have that designs all the houses for the people we relocate out here who want to build their own houses. We also own the general contracting. So we're vertically integrated in the process, which is why we can offer everything because we have that vertical integration. Yeah, definitely. If you guys are doing business, you want to move that way. You want to get as much vertical integration as possible. And then the formula is typically your opportunity cost versus liability, right? So how much liability is it to own that thing? And then what's the opportunity cost of not owning it, like of owning something else or investing that money somewhere else, and then go from there. So there's certain things that we didn't vertically integrate with like a travel company because the that equation didn't add up for that, right? So like we don't own a travel agency or a travel company or anything like that. Some of our clients will they'll finance everything in the US and then they'll roll their dice, right? A lot of the business clients will do this. They'll finance everything in the U.S. They'll roll the dice here in Kenya through a U.S. company that owns a certain percentage of their Kenyan company, right? So they'll be able to finance the whole thing off of like business financing and all of that. And they give it, a legitimate attempt. A lot of people actually succeed because it's easier to do business here. The folks who don't succeed, they know that they have bankruptcy. They can go back, they can deal with the Chapter 11, restructuring and do a corporate bankruptcy the same way Trump did, right? All 6 times, right? So they can do the same thing. Whereas if they use local financing, then they might not have that bankruptcy safety net. Individuals do it too. So a lot of individuals who were like, all right, I'm going to equity strip everything, I'm going to max everything out, and I'm going to give it a good faith attempt, and see what happens. And some of those folks, depending on where they go, actually end up paying everything back. So, their U.S. credit goes through the roof, even though they're not using it anymore, and their equity goes through the roof. Because depending on where you are, like if you're here, like this place is called Deani Beach, right? So Deani Beach is already a tourist zone in the country. So if you're doing stuff here, if you're doing rentals here, you're doing, whatever business here, you're probably making money in US dollars and or euros, right? And so if you're making money in US dollars or euros, it becomes a lot easier to pay back a US loan. So there's plenty of folks that took those loans and they didn't bankrupt and they didn't default. They actually paid them back because it was just easier for them to make money out here. So there's that as well, right? But if it goes wrong, the beauty of the American system is you have the safety net of bankruptcy. So they're able to claim a bankruptcy and move on, discharge all that debt. They still own their houses here. They still own their cars here. They still own all their stuff here. Credit is not universal, does not affect any kind of credit in Kenya. And that's the end of it, right? So they need their local legal team, their local bankruptcy attorneys and all of that to chime in on that. But those things happen all the time, right? So it ends up being a matter of like where there's a will, there's a way. The people who really want to come out here, and I can typically tell right from the initial consultation with them, the people who really want to get it done are going to get it done, and they're going to get it done, within weeks. People who are on the fence, which is okay, do not rush into anything that you're not passionate about. But the people who are on the fence, are better off getting whatever surety they need before they move. We always tell people that. right? So if I get the sense that like you're not really sure about what you're doing, I don't even want to move forward with you. I want you to go do your research, do your due diligence, do all that great stuff, and then come back when you're sure. Which is the beauty of being in the position that we're in, right? So we do the bond laddering that we were talking about yesterday, so that clients who want it have all of their basic income covered for the next 20 years, right? So they don't have to work; they just get a check every month from the government for the next 20 years. Okay, great. But once you're in that position, obviously we do the same thing for ourselves, right? So once you're in that position, I feel like you can do business better, because you don't need a sale. You don't need somebody to onboard. You don't need somebody to pay you. You're good for the next 20 years, right? You set yourself up the same way that you set your clients up, who don't want to work for the next 20 years, and everybody's good. So now, if someone's a little shaky, you're just like, nah, we're not going to do business with you. Just like, come back in a month if you feel like you still want to do it, or if you got the answers to your questions, or if there's some questions that we can answer, go ahead and send them to us, and and we'll work on them. But we're not going to take you on right now. You're a little shaky, and it surprises people sometimes. They're like, oh, I got the money. No, no, it's not the money. We don't care about the money. You're just, you're not ready, from our point of view, which means that you're not a target client for us. That's all. When that should also mean that we're not the right service provider for you, and we can just go from there. So that helps, because there's a lot of folks out here that will just say yes to anything because they need a dollar, right? The only other legitimate relocation service that we recognize in Kenya that's run by diaspora, is Traverse Culture. They're the only other legitimate relocation service in Kenya that's run by like a Black American, whatever. Other than that, a lot of folks will just say yes to anything because without the payment that you send in, they don't have a way to eat. They didn't do the planning, so they're living client by client, and they don't let a client go, and so they're saying yes to things they have no specialization in. They're saying yes to things they cannot do, right? And that's where the horror stories come from. So you want to make sure that your planning is on point, right? You want to make sure that you have like a basic level of income that's covered. We have most of our clients that can afford it, do the bond laddering, because then they're just guaranteed money for the next 20 years, right? And that puts you at a place of FU. That's where you want to be, right? You want to be, anybody tells you the wrong thing, F you. Anybody tells you to do work you don't want to do, F you. I'm good. I'm getting, my payments every month guaranteed by the government for the next 20 years. I don't need anything from you. That's where you want to be. Now you start doing the things you want to do. Now you start doing the things you're passionate about. Now you start spending the time you want to spend with your family. Now you have total freedom at that point. So that makes a difference. So definitely, if you're coming here and you can bond ladder, definitely bond ladder. It puts you just in a better overall position all the way around. Better with your family, better with your friends, better with your business, better with your work. It's just better. You don't have to worry about money. Trust me, everything gets better. Well, no. So it would typically be difficult, right? At home, right? So it would. That's what your 401k is for, right? But with the 401k thing, you got to wait until you're whatever, 65, 67, whatever they're going to raise it to, blah 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 blah. So when you relocate, it has to be part of your strategic plan. Here, it only costs 75,000. 75,000 is the equivalent of the that you're supposed to have, or at retirement, like 1.5 million or whatever. It's the 75,000 is the equivalent of that, right? So once you have that 75,000 and you deploy it properly, and ladder it properly, then yeah, you're solid. You had experience with the Class C. Yeah, but a Class C is almost like a work permit. Typically, if you're getting a Class C, someone's handling it for you, right? So a Class C and a work permit are the two permits where whoever's bringing you is typically handling that for you, right? So if you're Class C, you have to prove that like you're part of a professional organization, right? So that would be like the board, like if you're a lawyer and you've passed like the bar, like that bar is your professional organization. If you're a like registered nurse and you have a nursing license, then that's your professional organization, right? So then the equivalent professional organization in Kenya then gets involved, right? So this is one of those situations. A Class C is one of those situations like Aga Khan Hospital wants to introduce I don't know, a Da Vinci machine, right? Which is a surgical robot, which there are none on the African continent. There's a part-time one in South Africa. That's it. So robotic surgery coming to the continent. Let's say Aga Khan wants to do it, and they need a surgeon that can perform robotic surgery. They'll get a Class C permit, but Aga Khan will handle all of that, right? So typically, people don't initiate their own Class C permits because then you're just like, okay, you're a prescribed professional doing what? If you're doing it yourself, like, okay, great, you got a degree, who cares? Like, how are you using it to help us? You know what I mean? Because you got to remember that in the mind of all immigration, part of what it means to be an immigration professional is to protect the jobs of local people. That every immigration around the world in every country, that is part of their mandate, right? And that's why even volunteering is considered working without a permit if you don't have a work permit, because immigration sees it as, if you were not there to volunteer, we might pay a local citizen to do that job. But because maybe you have the means that you don't need money, you're now actually removing the opportunity for a local to get money. That's just the way they see it, right? And that's universal across every single country, right? So it's the same thing with this. It's like, all right, well, all right, maybe you are a professional, but how does that benefit Kenya, right? So typically, whoever you're doing the professional work with is the one handling that permit. So yeah, there's no such thing, Vision. You weren't here. You weren't here. You weren't here when we debunked that. So people say that, and I don't know why that marketing has popped up and stuff. You know what? I guess I do. Retirees like to think that they have a special class for themselves, and so people lie about it so that retirees will then go do business with them. There's no such thing as a retirement permit. What people are calling a retirement permit is called an ordinary residency permit. And the age requirement for that permit is 35 years old, not 65, not 55, right? It's not targeting retirees at all. Now, the requirements for the permit are typically met by retirees. So that's why you'll hear people say things like retirement permit, but there's no such thing. It doesn't exist. Quick question in regards to bond laddering. What happens if the owner passes away? Can it be given to the spouse or yeah, I mean there's definitely the next of kin thing. That will go through probate though. So typically what our folks do is we set up a generational wealth trust, and the trust does the bond laddering because distributions from the trust are tax exempt up to 10 million per year per beneficiary. So it's not like you're paying extra taxes by running it through the trust. So because there's no tax implication by running it through the trust, we do it that way, and then you don't have to worry about next of kin. It's in the trust, and the trust will distribute it in whatever way you command the trust to distribute it through the trust deed document. Um, Robert in the bamboo forest. Yeah, I mean, it's always great to hire locals for sure. That's the whole purpose of why, with an investor permit, which is what you need to run any business in this country if you're a foreigner, they make you put up $100,000 because it's put up or shut up. It's not, oh, well, I'll figure it out and hire locals. They don't They do not support lip service. It's I'm a real business person and I'm really going to hire locals and I'm really going to run a real business and I'm going to have bookkeeping and I'm going to have all my stuff together and I can prove it by putting this $100,000 in a local bank account. So they don't play with lip service and dreams or anything like that, which is great because you're not competing with a bunch of people who are just selling a story and then actually hurting the community because they can only hire them for a month and then they run out of money and now these people are unemployed and so that damages the economy. So they make sure that anyone who's claiming they can do business actually has the runway and actually has the capital to actually do business. Okay, it makes sense. Thanks. Yeah, yeah, no problem. Fill out a form on the website. How long does it normally take to receive correspondence email? You fill out a form on our website? And did you get the website from this channel? There have been some clones, unfortunately. Because if you got the website from this channel, it should be 48 hours. 48 hours, you should get a response. Okay. How long ago did you do that? I always like to get feedback on that. Hey, 6 foot, what's going on? 6'5". That's not an S. That's a five. All right. Your thoughts on a wedding venue? If it's in the right place, right? Those we all know that those things need to be in the right place, right? So the worst thing is when someone does something like that and then they're just like, "Oh, I'm just going to be in Nairobi because Nairobi's cool," right? So just make sure you do, your due diligence and it's in the right place. You know what I mean? Something like that will do really good in Kalifi. It'll do really good in Diani. It'll do really good in maybe Watamu. Should do okay in Lamu. Places like that, for sure. And there are some other places like if you can get like close to Lake Victoria in Kisumu, maybe. But it has to be a place that makes sense for what you're doing. But it can work. Good to hear it. 6'5". Good to hear it. Yeah, I'll double check um on whatever form you were supposed to fill out. Actually, yeah, I will double check. Our chief of real estate. It's not really real estate law. It's real estate conveyance is what they call it here. So our chief of real estate conveyance got married this week, and so all of the lawyers and all the employees and all of that were all part of. Everybody was a best person. You know what I mean? Part of the wedding procession and all of that stuff. So if it's been longer than 48 hours, definitely let me know. And I'm sure that's why it slipped through the cracks. But we had this discussion before it happened. Don't let the festivities mess up the job. So we'll see. We'll see what's going on with that. Question for you about business structure and what? Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Currently preparing to structure as a C corp. Are there avenues in Kenya? What are you saying? Are there avenues to structure a C corp in Kenya? What does that mean, avenues? Are you talking about like the roads? Give me a little more than that. Or if you need to come up and tell me, that's fine too. You can request to come up.
Hey, thank you for having me up.
Yeah, no problem.
Good. How you doing? Yeah, it was too little to type.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that.
Yeah, I'm currently researching, studying with Mac Enterprise Consulting about C Corporation, and my long term plan, at least 5 years out, is to bring something to Kenya. But my question is, um, are there, I guess, business professionals already in Kenya that I could just come there and structure, or should I structure here and just come over there already structured?
Well, so I'm trying to measure myself here. Um, so yes, you can structure here. There are business professionals here. You can do that. The let me take a breath and say this the right way. The strategy and the actual legal definitions of the structuring are important, of course, as you know. There are some misnomers floating around out there about structure. So I want to make sure that when you do your structuring, you get multiple opinions on which structures do what kind of things, right? Depending on what you're planning to do, the complexity and the additional overhead of a C corp might actually make sense because there is something called a dividends received deduction. A dividends received deduction can only be claimed by a C corp. Now, a dividends received deduction means that if the C corp owns another company, it can be any company, it can be LLC, it can be a corp that's taxed as an S corp, it can be a corp that's taxed as a C corp, it can be a public benefit corporation, it can be a nonprofit, right? Nonprofits don't have dividends, so that wouldn't really apply. But it can be any structure. It can even technically be a sole practitioner, right? So there's that. But when those dividends come into the C corp, they're tax exempt. Okay, so you can deduct the taxes up to 100% depending on how long you've held the shares, right? Now there's the foreign dividend received deduction as well. Now you have to hold the shares longer, so it takes better strategic planning. For the domestic deduction, I think you only have to hold the shares for either 60 days or 90 days, right? So it's something fairly simple. For the foreign deduction, you have to hold the shares for 365 days. So it has to be strategic when you receive those shares so that by the next time you file your taxes, you qualify, right? So there's that. The type of structures that exist are not universal. So not every country has a C corp. In fact, most countries do not. And most countries have something very similar to an LLC, which does not limit your income potential or anything like that. The limitations on an LLC is liability limitations, right? That's why Google is an LLC, right? Their parent company is a C corp. So most countries have something similar to an LLC, and they just call it a limited company. And you can limit it by shares, or you can limit it by It's typically by shares or by assets, right? And so that simply means that if anyone attacks you, what's the limitation to that attack? Right now, no matter what structure you choose, you are always the weak link. Because while the structure typically has limited liability protection, which is a legal protection that kicks in during lawsuits and stuff like that, where nobody can get through the corporate veil to you, you still own the shares, or if it's an LLC, the membership units, right? So if you get in a car accident and your insurance can't cover it, and you don't have an umbrella policy that covers the excess, that judge can say, all right, well, now your assets are forfeit to cover, the extra $1 million that you have to pay out because you got in this car accident and such a person died and they've won the lawsuit. So what do you own? You own the shares of the C Corp. So you're the weak link. They can take over the C Corp through you because there's no limited liability protection because that's your personal property, right? So that's why a lot of our clients have a trust, and the trust owns all the shares so that they don't own shares. And if they do, get into a car accident or something that's not, their fault, or at least not intentionally their fault, their shares aren't up for grabs, right? Because you're the weak link to that. So I want to be sure that what you're doing, number one, the C Corp, matters towards that. And it may, but it also may not. And then, be sure that that strategy is in place ahead of time so that everything flows very easily for you. Like typically, for example, short-term rentals don't make sense in a C Corp, right? And we have a lot of short-term rental businesses out here. So short-term rentals, the property itself, almost always, 99% of the time, it always makes more sense for them to be in an LLC from the state where the property is. Now, that LLC might be owned by a C Corp in Wyoming or something, right? So that might make sense. But typically, the way that mortgage laws and land laws work in most states, it doesn't make any sense at all to put operating property like that into a C Corp, because you're essentially going to get taxed 3 times if you do that, right? So with those clients, they're working on LLCs, and then if they want that dividend reduction, then what they're going to end up doing is they're going to have that C Corp above everything that owns everything, because that C Corp has to own at least 10% of the company that's giving in the dividends in order to get that deduction. So their dividend received deduction for the local LLCs will be your regular dividend received deduction, and then for the Kenyan company, it would be the foreign dividend received deduction, right? But that strategy doesn't work for everyone because it depends on how they're engaging with the business. If they're not engaging with the business and it becomes passive income, then that might change the strategy. If they're engaging with the business, or it's all short term, typically exempted from being passive income, because it's just not. If it's short term anyway, then it might make more sense. So there's a lot of surface level things that get said. There's a lot of things that are just outright wrong that get said, that you can then back up by like IRC. So like somebody can be like, oh, look at this commercial code. Oh, look at this internal revenue code. And then you read it and you're like, yeah, those codes aren't how you enforce those rules. The codes point you to what's called Treasury. You would then go to Treasury, and Treasury would tell you how those rules have been enforced, right? And then Treasury would point you to case law, right? So there's a lot of things that you can read. Like, for example, you can read that anything that's ordinary and necessary for your business is deductible. And you'd be like, oh, cool, I get to decide what's ordinary and necessary. No, you don't. Treasury for the last 60 years has decided what's ordinary and necessary. And there's case law to back up Treasury's decision. So even though in the IRC it says ordinary and necessary and then it doesn't define it, that doesn't mean it's not defined. It's just defined on a different level of government. And most people don't know how to do that research. So they just read that one line that maybe somebody promoted to them in their marketing. And so they've done their research because they read that line, right? They're like, oh, yeah, that sounds great. If I think it's ordinary and necessary for my business, I'm going to do that. That's not the way it works, right? And then people get away with it because audits are typically random, right? They don't have enough auditors to audit everybody, so they'll flag you, but then they'll do essentially a cost-based analysis of like, what am I going to get out of this person? Essentially, like, are they big enough? Is it going to be a 10-year fight? Are they too big? And then there's a formula by which they decide they're going to go after somebody and audit them. That's getting smaller though because of AI. So AI is now checking out people's returns and checking out what people are deducting, and they're starting to flag things that way. So just understand, get a couple different opinions. When anything is kind of presented as like secret knowledge that yeah, it's in the, but you got to read it over here, but people just don't know this. Everything is public knowledge, right? Everything is public knowledge. You just got to know how to research it. So it's worth it to get with somebody in your area. Typically, a CPA, JD, EA, right? So you want a certified public accountant who also has a Juris Doctorate, who is also an enrolled agent. Get with one of them and have a conversation, right? Pay for it if you have to, right? If there's a consultation fee, pay it. It's only going to be a couple $100s at max. Have a real conversation with them where they're taking accountability for the conversation. That's actually what that payment is for. Once you pay that money, right, it's called consideration. Once consideration has been made, all right, there's an attorney-client relationship there, even if it's temporary. So now there's something called errors and omissions. Now errors and omissions kicks in. If you're talking to somebody on TikTok or you're in a webinar, that doesn't kick in. Errors and omissions is like malpractice for like legal advice and tax advice and all of that stuff, right? So now accountability kicks in. Where like if you hear the wrong thing in that setting, somebody going to pay for it, right? So that's what I would recommend. I would recommend before you set up a C corp that might be unnecessary. Talk to a CPA, JDEA, right? Make sure that they have at least, at the very, very least, the EA qualification, right? You can skip the CPA. If the JDs are too expensive, maybe you can skip the JDs as well. But you want to make sure that you at least have an EA because they can represent you towards before the government as far as the IRS is concerned, right? So you want that person definitely on your team explaining how everything works locally. You want it to be like a local person because there's some state stuff in there as well, right? And that's what people miss all the time. That's where people got all the time is they got all their federal stuff straight and forgot about the state, right? So that's what I would recommend. Because I don't know too many people who start with the C corp and that made sense. You typically work up to a C corp. Now it happens, especially if you're like a Silicon Valley startup and like some VC gave you $1 million off the bat, then yes, a lot of times that's a requirement. But even those guys typically start as LLCs, and then to get that check, there's a requirement from the VC, like you will now start a Delaware C corp in order for us to, give you this $1 million VC check, and then that's how that works. So, just get a second opinion.
Understood. I appreciate your perspective. You touched on a lot of points, things that I've already been in self discovery about.
Awesome.
Because I made the mistakes of rushing into something or hopping on the LLC because a guru said to hop on the LLC.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no research or study behind it.
Right.
So just listening to you, I'm hearing all the stuff that I've been currently learning. And so it's helping. I'm glad that you shared all of that. I am looking at the C Corp simply because of the past errors I made and how to clean those up. But I have also in my research been learning that I can also start with an LLC and then convert later if need be.
You can possibly. Yeah, it depends on the state.
Yeah.
So that's a state thing again. But you can possibly do that. And the beauty of it is, even if your state doesn't allow it, depending on what you're doing, you can move to another state. So you can take your organization to another state, and the states that are best to do that in all allow it. Not every state has that, but you can move an organization from one state to the other in a state that allows it. The incoming state has to allow it. So yeah, you definitely can, and you can also. So there's no additional. I'm trying to think before I say that, because typically absolute statements are typically false. But I can't think of any legal additional protection that say like a C corp has that an LLC doesn't have. So the C corp is the C part is just the tax code. It's section C of the IRS. Just like there's section S of the IRS, which is an S corp. You're really just a corp, right? You're a corporation and you're being taxed under section C, or you're being taxed under chapter S, right? And so that's what the S and the C are actually about. So you can be an LLC that's taxed as a C corp, right? In which case you're now your taxes are the same and you still have the same protections. The difference is in, I guess, in practice, is that there's something called a single member LLC and there's something called a multi-member LLC. A single member LLC's default status is pass through, which means that there's terminology that the IRS uses that sometimes confuses people. And the terminology that the IRS uses is disregarded entity. And then people sometimes they'll see that and they'll be like, oh, I don't want to be disregarded. I don't want to be disregarded by banks. I don't want to be disregarded. That's not what it means. What it means is that the entity has no tax liability. The tax liability passes through to whatever owns it. Like I said, Google is an LLC. If you go look up, on the state database, Google, it is Google LLC, right? The tax liability passes through to the parent company, which is Alphabet Incorporated, right? So that's all that disregarded entity means. But if you are a multi-member LLC, even if the multiple members are married, so if the multiple members are husband and wife, you are not a disregarded entity, right? And so, in practice, what that means is courts will protect you the same way they protect anything else because there's someone else to protect. Typically, court protection in lawsuits against any kind of corporate entity is typically about who else is there to protect, right? The government steps in to protect the of the entity. If you're a single member LLC, who else is there to protect, right? And so that's where courts are sometimes like, I'm just going to pierce your corporate veil because you're the only one. So, and everything passes through to you. So why wouldn't I let this lawsuit pass through to you? Like, who am I protecting in this situation? No one, right? Now you're just kind of hiding behind a corporate veil because you're everything in this organization type of situation, right? But if there's another member, now it's like, oh, okay, yeah, same thing as an S corp or a C corp or anything else. There are other people who are not party to this case that need to be protected. So the corporate veil now holds, right? And you can't, pass through that corporate veil now because there are other parties in here that have nothing to do with this, and there's no standing to go after them, right? So that's, the ground that sometimes people get confused and they think that there's a very large difference in legal protection based on entity, but it's not based on entity, it's based on membership, right? And it can happen in a C corp if there's only one shareholder, right? So the courts can still be like, there's still only one shareholder, I don't know, we're just going to pierce your corporate veil and see if you can overturn it on appeal, you know so it's really a matter of how many people are part of your company where you get the full on protection of any company in the courts, in like the civil courts.
Okay, that's good to hear. I'm believing because I'm in food service. I'm a chef, and
Nice.
the plan is to bring not the food but the skill set to Kenya,
Okay.
and whatever the current foods are in Kenya, then there'll be a facility there to set up a restaurant and hire locally. But the LLC fear, uh, the LLC fear that's floating around is that your name is attached to the EIN, and you don't want to have that because um, I think for a couple of reasons. One is you're not the respectability factor is somehow gone if your name is attached to the EIN. The C corp, your name is not attached to the EIN, and for some reason there's more respectability about that. And I think there's another issue. Uh, uh, I'm stumbling about it. So I remember the other issue, but there were at least two concerns that I was looking at. I guess the importance of getting your name off of the EIN regarding the how the IRS sees you, or uh, something about your name being attached to the EIN as an LLC that kind of lessens you in the business world. So that's why, man, I'm doing all this research because I don't know what's what. I
Yeah.
want to make sure that I'm looking at everything and making the proper decision.
Yeah. So that the EA I was talking about, that would be the very first thing I asked them, because I think I think either somebody is confused, like the same thing with the disregarded entity thing. They may be confused about how that actually works, and by the way they're seeing it, they're thinking that there's some kind of issue there that doesn't actually exist. Typically, what ends up happening is it'll say sole member if you're a sole member LLC, right? And so it'll say sole member, and it'll have a name there. But even if you do a C corp, when you go to get your EIN, it's the same form, right? So again, I think what's ending up happening is on your tax transcripts, if you use pass through taxation, because that's an option. You don't have to do that with an LLC. But if you use pass through taxation, that's where there's this thing where it went directly to your name because you passed the taxes through, right? Which you can't
Right.
do. That is
Okay, that's the
not
other thing.
that is not the default on a multi-member LLC, right? The tax default is not pass
Okay.
through on a multi-member LLC. It's partnership, right?
Okay. That's the
So
other part that I remembered. Is the other part was the personal guarantor. If your name is attached, you are a personal guarantor. So, like, if you walk into a bank with your LLC, um, you are held liable for any loans you get. But for some reason, it makes it harder for you to get a loan through the bank with an LLC simply because your name is attached. Something about they don't take you as seriously if you walk into a bank to get a loan for your business because your name is on that EIN. You should walk in to get a with a corporation.
yeah, that's so that all right, I'm just going to say it. That's just not true, right? I've heard it before, and that's why when you mentioned the name you mentioned up front, I paused. It's just not true. Here's what happens, right? And so the original iteration of my business when I was still in the United States was to help people get government contracting, to help people get government grants, federal contracting, and set up companies, right? So my core competency was actually formation structuring, and then grant writing and contract writing or RFPs and all of that. So the truth of it is that most people have an LLC because of the ease of getting an LLC. Do not follow what they call normal business practices within that LLC. So what does that mean? It means that they don't have an annual meeting. It means that when they make a decision, they're not doing meeting minutes and drawing out directorates, from the board saying, okay, yes, we need to buy a business cell phone, and the board orders the LLC to go to T-Mobile and buy this cell phone and establish this business account, right? And so they don't do these things. They have their pass through organization. They do their taxes on their own personal tax return, and that's the end of it. And they don't build business credit, right? And so what used to happen, unfortunately, it's not like this anymore. And I say unfortunately for this exact reason. What used to happen when you signed up with sam.gov was you used to have to go to an organization called Duns and Bradstreet, which was a private organization that they don't use anymore. And I guess that's why, because it's a private organization. I get it, but I really wish they still used it. Because what ended up happening was you would get what's called a DUNS number. And the DUNS number was a corporate credit number for that corporate credit agency. At the time, there was only two. Now there's three, right? Major. There's always multiple minor credit agencies, but now there's three. So at the time, there was only two. It was Duns and Bradstreet's, and I think the other one might have been Equifax Business or whatever. Now there's a TransUnion Business as well, right? And so the business credit score went from 0 to 100. Okay. And so if you built business credit, which typically took 2 years, you would be able to get unsecured business lines of financing. If you did not build business credit, then you would have to have a personal guarantee for all of your business, lines of financing, right? That is still true with the C corp, right? So what ends up happening is there are even situations like if you go to what is the name of the place? The name will come to me, but there are online groups, I guess, or I guess maybe you could call it social media networks, but they're business specifics and they're for you finding business partners, right? Co-founder Lab is one of them, right? So you can go to cofounderlab.com and you can sign up and you can actually put out there looking for a corporate CFO for my C corp. And if you search, you'll actually find this, right? So, you can use that as part of your independent research. But if you search, you'll see people saying, "Hey, looking for CFO for startup C corp," right? Because they want VC funding, and VCs typically want C corps because they want the shares, right? So, C corp, Delaware C corp, looking for CFO, and then the requirements of the CFO will be like credit ratings and all of that, right? And part of the pay for the CFO will be expanded pay because you're using the CFO's credit, right, to go after bank stuff. So like this CFO comes on as a co-founder, right? So now they own part of the business because they're actually putting their personal guarantee up because there's not enough time in that C corp for the C corp to get its own funding, right? So the idea of so what ends up happening is people will go through the experience of having an LLC. Yes, I've had an LLC for 20 years, but they've never had a business account in all 20 of those years, right? They didn't build any business credit whatsoever, and age alone is not enough, right? And so they'll have that experience of going to the bank and not being able to get, business lines of credit and all of that stuff. And it'll discourage them. And so then they'll hear this thing about, well, you should have had a C corp. If you had a C corp, then you'd be able to get it. And it's just not true, right? If that was true, everybody would just open up a C corp and go get credit that's not attached to their name. You know what I mean? So it's just about building a credit profile. If you build a solid credit profile, you're golden. Like you're going to get what you want. You know what I mean? Because under that theory, again, and definitely please, fact check this. Under that theory, Google wouldn't be able to get credit because it's an LLC. And it's always been an LLC, right? So, and if you go look, it's clear as day, Google LLC, right? So, and there's no personal guarantor on any Google credit cards. I can promise you. So it's one of those things where it's just a matter of people who have been through it and people who are trying to get funding and didn't get it. They resonate with the message, but the message is at best a misunderstanding of fact, in my professional opinion.
I'm open to that. I gave you a follow. I've learned a lot already. Continuing to learn. It's like, for example, Taylor Brands is a C corp, but their main thing is LLC. So my thing was, okay, I understand that there's a whole lot to learn, and you should take your time.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was a curious point.
Yeah.
That Taylor Brands would be selling LLCs, even though they are a C corp.
Right.
And so maybe there's more to it than that.
Definitely.
I'm sure there's more to it than that.
Definitely. Because what is happening is your tax filing situation is way more complicated as a C corp, even than an S corp, right? Sometimes that's worth it though, right? Especially like if you're raising money. If you're raising VC money, most VCs are going to demand that you're a C corp, not because of funding; they're giving you the funding, right? So they're not putting themselves in a position where they're obsolete. Or if you get this C corp now, you have access. You just go to the bank and get the funding. Why are you coming to me, right? It's not that. They're setting up the C corp because of the business norms established with that entity, and they'll typically force you to put it in like Delaware. And depending on where you're operating, there maybe they'll choose Luxembourg if it's like a European venture, but typically it's Delaware. And the reason why they use Delaware is because of the Chantry Court. So what they'll do is they'll say, okay, if it's a Delaware C corp, there are 150 years, 200 years of case law that let me know that if this goes the wrong way, this is exactly how the case is going to go. What's up, Eddie boy? So this is exactly how the case is going to play out. I know exactly, my rights as an investor. I know exactly what they have to do on their side as a fiduciary, and so on and so forth. So now I know exactly what to expect, and when they screw up, I know they've screwed up, and I know how to sue them, and that's what that's about, right? And so it's that structure, of the shares and the board and all of that. It's already in place because a C corp holds its structure when it goes public. LLCs can go public too, but when they go public, they have to restructure, right? But a C corp will hold its structure when it goes public. The only reason why they dislike, well, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why they dislike an S corp is because with the S corp, your shareholders are limited to 100, and they all have to be American. With the C corp, you can have shareholders from Canada, you have shareholders from the UK, you can have. I mean, one of the biggest VCs is SoftBank. SoftBank is Japanese, right? But if SoftBank comes in on your round, you're golden. Like you're almost a guaranteed success because they have almost unlimited funds, right? So you can't do that as an S corp because all your investors need to be either U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents, and you could only have 100 of them, right? So these are the reasons. Most of that stuff have nothing to do with like any kind of EIN or taxation or definitely like bank loan type stuff. Most of that stuff, high level legal reasons why they choose those formations for what they're doing, and those formations are not universal. So when you're looking at going overseas, then you want to look at, all right, what am I going to do? How am I going to get money back at all? A lot of our clients don't even bring the money back, right? But some of our investor permit clients do because they have a functioning business in the United States, and then they're kind of expanding that business into Kenya, and then that business in the United States is going to get paid. So now if they're going to do that, it might make sense for them to have a C corp that owns 10% of the limited company in Kenya, right? And then they get access to possible tax exempt dividends through the foreign dividend received deduction, right? Which they can't do with an S corp, they can't do with an LLC, right? So in that regard, the strategy might allow them to go ahead and say, all right, I need a C corp. But as soon as they do that C corp, their filing requirements go through the roof, right? Also, their business requirements go through the roof. They might need quarterly meetings. They might need annual meetings. They might need to start paying taxes quarterly, and even in some states monthly, right, instead of annually, right? So all these things that change. That's why as soon as you say C corp, a CPA would typically sit back. They'd be like, really? Do you really need, because now it's a full-time job. Are you going to hire me 120,000 a year? Because now I'm doing work for you every month instead of at the end of the year in February or April, right? So sometimes it's absolutely necessary. Sometimes it's really not, right? So it's just a matter of like, get an independent legal perspective, which is where that CPA JDEA comes in. A CPA JDEA is a tax attorney, right? They're not just a CPA. So get that independent perspective from somebody that once they open their mouth to you, they're on the hook, right? So they're not going to fiddle around with words and like, and misinterpret anything. Like they're going to tell you exactly what it is, because if they tell you the wrong thing, their errors and emissions insurance, which they typically have to have in order to have their license, is going to kick in and pay you out when something wrong happens.
Right.
So they're going to tell you exactly what it's hitting for, and I think you're going to hear something a lot similar to what to what we're telling you now. Unfortunately, I can't just give you direct tax advice because I'm not a CPA or an EA, and my law firm doesn't exist in the United States. It's a Kenyan law firm, so I can't give you U.S. Legal advice either. But I can tell you what we've experienced through our clients, and based on that, you know, I would definitely recommend you just sitting down. A lot of those guys do have free consultations because they've heard some of the things that you've said before, and they understand that people really get themselves in deep, trouble, and so they typically do have like some sort of free consultation where they'll clarify all of that stuff for you.
Okay, okay, I see what you're saying. I appreciate you. You've helped me a lot
No problem, brother.
on this research journey.
No problem at all.
Just don't want to, I've tasted I've tasted the bitterness already, and I don't want to go back down that
I
road.
know that's right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
All right, thank
Yeah,
you so much for
are
your
you
help.
doing a bunch of business in the US now?
Not enough. Um,
I would say just do a, if it were me, if you were coming to me and you were working through me and you were trying to do business here, we would probably recommend you just open the company here because you can always give your shares later, right? So the
right.
equivalent of an LLC and a C corp here is a limited company essentially, right? So you get shares. You don't get membership units like a U.S. LLC. So it operates on that share system like a C corp would. But if there's some reason why you would need to involve a U.S. company, which is typically a funding reason. We haven't seen very many other reasons why you would involve a foreign company in your Kenyan company, other than you want to take your funding, your bank funding, from your source company and utilize them in the foreign company. So in order to do that, then the foreign company would need to be a subsidiary of the parent company, and then obviously the parent company could then finance the foreign company.
Let me
But if that's
let me get
not,
to my pen.
was that?
I'm getting to my pen because I'm going to ask you another question if you
Yeah,
don't
no
mind
problem, no
for me.
problem. But yeah, so yeah, that's
Um,
really the end of that. Go ahead, ask your question.
okay, regarding that, regarding that idea, because I was already thinking about that, just coming and starting there. Um, are there any like online resources I can look at to kind of put me more in connection with those Kenyan resources? Like for example,
Hmm.
regarding travel, I've only heard of two companies. I've heard of Traverse Culture,
Yep, very good
and
company.
I've heard of the company, the husband and wife team that do travel for South Africa.
Oh, for
I'll
South
forget
Africa.
the
Okay,
name real quick.
okay. Yeah, Traverse
Yes.
Culture,
So
very good company. We would definitely endorse them. The other company, I don't know who that is, but Traverse is legit.
okay, okay, good, good. So just like that, I was just curious if there were like those, for lack of a better term, those how to start a business in Kenya type companies.
Yeah, I mean, so we do it. Traverse also does it. Now we're as us two, we're the only like foreigners who do it legitly, right? You can hire any business law firm too and kind of work with them. Just make sure that they are a business law firm. You can look all that up online independently, right? So you can go to what is it, LSK, what is it, LSK dot ke or dot go dot government dot ke, right? So LSK dot go dot ke. That's essentially the bar association. So you can go there, you can plug in the name of anybody who claims to be a lawyer, and it'll pop up whether they're a lawyer or not. But beyond it popping up whether they're a lawyer or not, it'll show you what kind of law they do, right? Because you can call a law firm and they hear your accent and you're an American, and dollar signs go off in their head, and then they're a I don't know, maybe they're a maybe they're a real estate lawyer, right? And you're like, oh, I want to start this food service business, right? Which is going to require certifications. You're already right off the bat, you're going to require some kind of certification from KEBS. I can tell you that right off the bat. You know, there's all these, you know, it's like EPA and FDA in America. The same type of thing exists here, but they wouldn't know that as a real estate lawyer, right? But the dollar signs then went off in their heads. So like, yeah, yes, sir, I can do it. I'm an attorney. I can do it, right? But they've never done it before,
Right.
right? So now they're experimenting with your money. So when you go to
Right.
LSK and you put them in there, not only will it say, yes, this person is a lawyer, the other thing is their license has to be valid, which they have to renew every year. The year that they don't
Okay.
renew their license, they're not licensed to practice law that year. So it'll show you if their license is renewed. Not only will it show you if their license is renewed, it'll show you what law they do. Like we have a chief of immigration law. You go to her profile on LSK, it's like 90% immigration law. We got a chief of real estate conveyance that handles all the land that our clients buy to build the structures either for their businesses or their homes. You go to their profile on LSK, she's like 60% real estate law and the others contract law. Well, you need a contract to buy real estate, so that makes sense. You know what I mean? But you go in there and it says this person who told you that they're going to do all your business conveyances is 90% real estate law, right? Because you called the first, law firm that popped up and it doesn't say real estate law firm. Now you know you got the wrong lawyer, right? So all of those things are very easy to independently research if you know where to go and research them. So just make sure that that you're doing that. But we do it. Traverse Culture can also do it for you, or you can just call any law firm, or if you want like a plug into a law firm that like maybe somebody knows about or something like that, and you're not looking to work with us or Traverse, then go to the embassy and ask the embassy for their list of attorneys. And then typically those attorneys understand that you've come from the embassy. So if there's a problem, you're going to complain to the embassy. And no matter how much business you're trying to do with them, it ain't nothing compared to what the embassy does with them. So they're not trying to lose the embassy to rip you off. So if that's like a major concern or something, I know people got trauma and stuff over that. So if that's some kind of major trigger point or something like that, sometimes that makes those people feel better. The major difference between us and Traverse is that we're a U.S. company. So we get a lot of the people with that trigger concern and like that that scam concern or whatever, because they can just walk down to their local police station and file a report on us and it sticks. Our bank accounts get frozen. We get hauled into small claims court. We're a U.S. company that's based in the U.S. and then we own that vertical integration out here. So we own a law firm out here. We own whatever, but you can hold us accountable to U.S. law. So a lot of people are comfortable with that, and that ends up being why they go with us. But Traverse is as legit as it comes. Like Traverse is 100% legit. So you can do business with them as well. And we don't own
Awesome.
them or nothing like that. But we're not gonna lie about them either. They're 100% legit.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. No problem. No problem. I just saw you on here. It's my first time seeing you, and I said, "Oh, let me jump in and listen to him, see what he's talking about." Because you're what you're currently what I currently see that you're representing is the path that I'm trying to go down.
I heard that.
So I will continue to watch and learn more.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for stopping by. And yeah, man, hang out. I'm here every day about this time.
All right. Appreciate. That's Kenya behind you, huh?
Yes, yes. Can you buy? Yeah. Where you at
All
now?
right. Looks good. I'm calling you from Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. All right. All right. Yeah, man. Yeah. So yeah, this is it. I'm trying to figure out like maybe a day when I come on at night out here. So it's like daytime out there. But I think for LA, you would probably miss that because it'd probably be like 4 in the morning, But for the East Coast, it's like midnight. So I'm trying to figure out how to come on a little earlier for the East Coast folks. But we'll work it out.
Okay. Well, if I really want to catch a live, all I have to do is set my alarm clock and get up.
There it is. There it is.
Uh, uh, so I'll keep that in mind. I appreciate you so much.
Not a problem at all. Thanks for coming through, my friend.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. I saw some questions about bond laddering. So Let me first say, are there any other questions on permits? Because that was the talk for today. I know you guys love bond laddering because you like to be able to not work anymore. So I will go ahead and answer the question on bond laddering as soon as I make sure that there are no more questions on permits. So I'm gonna give it a 30 seconds or whatever. If you're asking a question on permit, just throw a one in the chat. I'll wait for your question before we go back to bond laddering, and then I'll answer that question on bond laddering. That's actually the first question from Fanbase. That's awesome. We're gonna keep going live on Fanbase just as a do it for the cult type of thing. But first Fanbase question, outstanding. Any other questions on immigration permits? Okay, so then we will go into the bond laddering question, which is I caught the tail end of your talk yesterday on bond laddering. Don't really get it, but I do like the fact that you don't have to work for 20 years. So can you explain it to us again? All right, sure. One of the services that we provide for our clients that are relocating, or our generational wealth trust fund clients, or our business relocation clients, is bond laddering. Bond laddering is the strategic acquisition of treasury bonds so that those bonds pay out every month of the year. That's what bond laddering is. Can you do it anywhere? Yes. You can do it anywhere that you have access to treasury bonds. Some countries don't. They only let banks get access to treasury bonds. But any country that you have access to treasury bonds, you should be able to do it. The difference here is that Kenyan bonds are exceptional right now, right? I know you're on fan base, so you can't see this, but I'm gonna put up on TikTok an example of a bond, and then I'll go through it, and you'll just need to imagine it there on Fanbase. So this is the current bond. This bond is currently open, right? So there are two of them currently open. The FDX one 2019 020 has 13.2 years left on its maturity. Okay, it was a 20-year bond. It's being reopened. That 2019 was the first year that it was opened. The withholding tax on it is 10%. You don't have to pay 10% tax. They withhold 10% of the payout when they make the payout to you. And their guaranteed rate of return for the next 13 years, 13.2 years, is 12.873%. Okay, the S&P 500 has historically grown at 10%, 10.5% a year, right? So the S&P 500 is considered to be a 10% return on investment annually, or 10.5%. You can already see at 12.8, that's more, right? So a Kenyan treasury bond currently is giving a better rate of return than the S&P 500 in America, right? The other bond that's currently open is the FXD1 2022. So that's the first year that that came out. It was 25 years when it came out. There are 21.8 years left. They're reopening it. It has an interest rate of 14.188%. Again, way above S&P 500, right? The withholding tax on this is 10%. Now, the creme de la creme of these bonds are called infrastructure bonds. Infrastructure bonds aren't always available. There's not available right now, as a matter of fact, right? An infrastructure bond is tax exempt, and that's why it's so highly sought after. So there's 0% withholding tax on the infrastructure bonds, and when they come out, people jump on them. Currently, our generational wealth clients have all stepped into this bond, right? So all of our established generational wealth clients, which means that they have a generational wealth trust, they have all ordered this bond, right? 14.188% for the next 20 years is awesome, okay? And so when you ladder, here's the other thing you'll see. Let me switch this to the payout. Okay, so there's the payout schedule for both bonds. So what you'll see now, the first column, because of the way that TikTok formats these images, unfortunately is you can't see it. But what you can see from beyond that is it's every 6 months. You get a payout every 6 months, right? So there's two payouts in 2027, two payouts in 2028, two payouts in 2029, and even though the first column is cut, you can see that 2029 is the last number there. Two payouts in 2030. It goes all the way up to 2047. At the end, you get your principal back, right? Whatever principal is left, you get the principal back. Right now, the reason I say whatever principal is left is because halfway through a bond, what they'll do is they'll kick out half of what was invested in the original bond, as they'll return it, okay, and they'll leave the other half to rock out as long as you had more than 1 million units in that investment, right? If you had less than 1 million units, it's not $1 million, it's 1 million Kenyan shillings in that investment, then you get all of it back, right? So our minimum when we bond ladder a client is 1 million, so that you get to enjoy the entire bond, you get to enjoy the entire 20 years, and you have that security the whole way through, right? So then halfway through that, or at some point, it's not always exactly the halfway point, they'll kick out a 500,000 back to you, right? But you'll still get the same percentage going forward. So what that means is our clients who bond ladder typically come in, they typically engage at about 75,000 US dollars, and then we buy them 6 bonds. Like I said here, you get paid twice a year. So 6 bonds is 12 payments. There are 12 months in a year, right? So you get these 12 payments coming in. Every year you get about 50,000 local units. Actually, most people get more than that. We just do the basis off of 10%. As you saw, both of those bonds were well above 10%, right? Even with the 10% withholding tax, still well above 10%. So we do our base at 10%. So we 50 because we're dealing with 10%. But everybody so far has gotten more than that, right? So that's how you have this check coming in every month, passive income that sustains you or your business, or cultivates your generational wealth family trust by pumping that money in every month. And then at the end of the 20 years, that trust will get the lump sum of money. So it'd be 6 million local units that trust would get dumped into it at the end of the term, or 3 million if it already got 3 million in the halving, right? And so that's how that works. Did that answer your question? I hope it did. All right. Let me know if that answered your question or not. Everybody loves bond laddering. A very high rate of our clients utilize it. It's so important, honestly, that we even recommend for some people, like if they're tight on the money, and like they're in a position where it's like, I'm building this house and like I can't afford. We're like, build a smaller house. Build a smaller house. There's nothing like not needing money. I'm telling you, it changes everything. If your basic needs are met financially and you're getting a check that's guaranteed by the government, for the next 20 years, every month, and you don't need the work, your life changes. Build a smaller house. You'll be able to build a bigger house later because you have the freedom to make more money later. How much would 3 million shillings give you in returns per annum? It depends, right? It depends. Like, so for this one, let me go back to the government perspectives. So for this one, okay. So let's say you're doing this one, right? So you're doing the next 21 years. Now remember, they are going to half you halfway through, but so what? That's like 10 years of you getting, your annual return. So for this one, 1 million would give you 141,880, right? So 3 million is 3 times that. So I'd have to break out the calculator, but let's see. So you got 141,880 per annum times three. So 425,640, right? So almost a half a million per annum. Now remember, they pay out twice a year. So if you did 3 million, that would be about 212,820 shillings a month, right? For those 2 months that this pays out. Now remember, to ladder, you need six, right? That's why our base ladder is just 1 million. So you need 6 million, you right, to get all 12 months. So you're getting a check every month. That's basic. We have people who do come in and say, I don't want to do 6 million. I want to do 18 million. I want, like you said, I want 3 million on each bond so that I'm getting, 200,000 a month, right? So people do that. I don't even spend 100,000 a month, and I have a full staff. I have living workers that live in my house. I have a gardener. I have three very large dogs. I'm about to get a fourth, a cane corso. Their food is ridiculous. I have a vet on staff for them. I have lawyers that are on staff, my personal lawyers that get paid. So I got some expenses. I do not spend 100,000 shillings a month, right? So somebody who's going through 212,000 a month has a significant lifestyle. But yeah, I mean, to be able to do that, to be able to say, okay, I'm going to now make X amount of dollars, per month, period. Whether I work, whether I don't work, doesn't matter. The government has guaranteed me X amount of dollars per month for the next, 20 years. That changes your life. That changes the decisions that you make. That changes the risks that you take, right? So a lot of our clients, they wouldn't take the investment risks that have made them millionaires now, right? They've taken big risks and gotten big payouts because if that risk failed, they could still eat. They were guaranteed that they were getting X amount of dollars per month that they knew could support them. And typically our clients build houses with us, right? So that's why we were saying before, sometimes we'll tell a client like, look, we recommend you get a smaller house. You know what I mean? You'll be able to get another house later. You build another house in 5 years or something. But for right now, we recommend you get a smaller house so you can put that money into this laddering. Because the other thing is, the bonds will not be amazing forever. This is not like a fixture of Kenyan economy, right? This would not be a fixture of that. This would be a fixture of, the current economy. So eventually, bond interest rates are going to go down. Now, that doesn't affect you if you've already purchased the bond. Your rate is locked in. But eventually, bond interest rates are going to be like 7%, 8%, which is nothing. It's not a bad thing, but it's not beating the S&P 500 like it is now, right? So, just to clarify, I just jumped in. 18 million structured gives you around 200K in shillings. Yes. Right. And that's based on this number, not every bond. Even here, the two bonds that are available right now, this one's 12%, this one's 14%. So we were working with this 14.188%, right? So there's typically an average. What we typically do with our clients is we say, okay, the minimum is 1 million. And the reason why the minimum is 1 million is because if you don't do 1 million, when the bond halves, they give you all your money back and you're essentially kicked out of the bond. So you'll get kicked out of the bond in half the time if you don't invest at least 1 million, right? That's just the way bonds work in Kenya. So that's why our base is 1 million. And then with our clients, for expectation purposes, we base everything off of 10%. We have never had a 10% bond that has popped up. So they always get more than that base. So when we're dealing with the base, if you do 1 million and we're basing it off of 10%, then the monthly payout that we are talking to our clients about is 50,000 a month. If they want 100,000 a month, then they double that. They do 2 million. If they want 150,000 a month, then they triple that. They 3 million, right? So now we've calculated based on this month's bond that they would actually get 212, thousand, not the 150,000 that we present, but we always present based on 10% as a matter of managing expectations, right? Great. What about the taxes? Paid from the returns. Yep. You don't pay any additional taxes. You will get a document from KRA called a tax withholding certificate, and that tax withholding certificate will be proof to KRA that your taxes were paid, and those taxes are paid from the return. When you get your deposit, which is automatic, it hits the bank account, and the days that those payments come out are already preset. So these are the two bonds that we were just looking at. So every day that you get a payment is already preset all the way up until 2047. And so when that payment hits, you'll already see that the 10% has been withheld, and then you'll get a tax certificate at the end of the year from the Central Bank of Kenya. So it's a pretty smooth process. There's not a whole lot of paperwork or extra anything that you have to go through. You just got to get that central bank account set up, and that's it. But it does put you in a position of, I can do whatever the hell I want. Right? A lot of clients still have a job, right? They got that basic money coming in, but they still have an overseas job or whatever, they're doing. And that's fine. But let their boss say the wrong thing to them. F you, I'm gone. Like, they just don't need it, right? It's great to have that extra money coming in, and of course you take advantage of ad hoc decisions, but your life changes completely when you don't need money, right? The moves you make are completely different. The decisions you make are completely different. The friends you keep are completely different, right? The stuff you put up with, completely different when you do not need money. And then for our clients that are like really about it, they get the trust fund, right? Because a Kenyan family trust, anything that goes into a Kenyan family trust is tax exempt. So anything granted into the trust is tax exempt going in, so no stamp duty going in, right? And coming out of a family trust to a beneficiary every year, there's 10 million that's tax exempt, right? So as long as what's coming out of the trust on an annual basis does not exceed 10 million Kenyan shillings, it is tax exempt to the beneficiary. What does that mean? That means that if you don't own the bond, no one can take it from you. So if you get in a car accident, if you get sued, if someone breaks their leg falling down the steps in your house, right? And they come for you, they can't touch that bond if it's in the trust because you don't own it, the trust owns it, and you're just a beneficiary of the trust. You are not the trustee. If you're the trustee, you messed yourself up. Now a judge can order you to give that money to somebody. You are not the trustee, you are the beneficiary. The trust owns it. The trustee is a lawyer, right, or a corporate trust company, and they will distribute those funds to you tax exempt because it's a distribution from a family trust under 10 million a year, right? So it depends on how much protection you need and what your risk tolerance is, but you can definitely set yourself up for life, and you can set yourself up for life in such a way that no one can take it from you, right? So it just depends on what kind of freedom you're looking for. However, the expenses are higher on my end. Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, it would have to match whatever it is. Now, we've never had someone who needed more than 150. That doesn't mean those people don't exist, right? We've just never had that. But typically, when people have like super high expenses, they typically have access to super high capital, right? Like, where did those super high expenses come from if you don't have access to super high capital? So the folks that do have super high expenses, the other thing to look at is we typically use this as a base, right? Because, for example, all right, let me break it down from the beginning, just so you get a really clear picture of this, right? The last person that we did this for example, they came in, they bought their land through us, they immigrated through us, or a law firm immigrated them over here, Class K permit, bought the land, okay, awesome. So they bought their land. Our GC built the house for them, cool, they built their house. We bought them a car, converted their driver's license, they have a Kenyan driver's license, they're solid. They own their car cash, own their house cash, own their land cash, and they have, valid immigrant status here. Solid. Okay. Bought their trust, bought their bond laddering. The bond laddering covers their needs, including like food, right? So their bills in the house are what? Well, when they built their house, they upgraded to off grid. So they have a solar system. They live in Deani Beach where it's like this every day, right? Well, you got, let me turn off the picture. It's like this every day, right? And we're on the equator. So it's 12 hours sun, 12 hours of no sun, right? So the solar works. They have their own borehole. They don't pay a water bill. All right. They have a biodigester, so they don't have a sewage bill, right? So their only bill inside the house is they do have an electric hookup, which is a backup. They've been paying 13 cents a month in electric, right? So whatever. Beyond that, they have internet, obviously. So they pay their internet bill. Inside the house, that's their only bill. They don't have a water bill. They don't have a gas bill because they make enough electric that all the things that would be gas, they have electric. So they have like electric stove and all of that. They don't have a sewage bill, none of that. So all of that's already taken care of, right? So they have an internet bill and then like Netflix or whatever, right? That's their inside the house bills. So their bonds pay for their groceries, pay any taxes they might have, pays for their insurance, both car and medical, pays for the fuel that they put in their car. Remember, they own the car free and clear. They own the property free and clear. And if it's agricultural property, which it typically is, there's no taxes on that property, right? So all of that stuff is all owned free and clear, and they have these bonds paying them every single month. That's their base, right? So then what do? Then they go look into things like Oak Special Fund. Oak Special Fund has a 20% return on investment right now, right? That's not a bond though. You might not get that next year, right? That now we're playing with risk. Now it's real investing, right? Where the risk of all investing is you lose your entire investment, right? But because their basic needs are met and they got that check coming in every single month from the treasury bonds, now they can take that risk, right? There's Mansa X Special Fund. Google these funds. Oak Special Fund, like an oak tree. Mansa X Special Fund. Mansa X is giving a 20% ROI right now as well, right? So now you can invest in these things. You can invest in IFTs. You can invest in money market funds. You can invest in Forex funds. You can invest in precious metals, commodities, speculation even, right? All of those things that are typically riskier than people like to deal with are now not as risky because your basic income is met, right? Basic, right? So if you're thinking of like all your expense, like you like to travel, you like this, you like that, and that's not what this is for. You still want to, figure that out a different way. This is, I'm covered. My food is covered, my medical is covered, my house is covered, my taxes are covered, my basic life is covered. Now from there, where do I go play? Right? Am I going to do crypto? Am I going to do precious metals? Am I going to do money market funds? Or am I just going to do more and more treasury bills? Because again, if I put up the treasury information for you guys, right? The treasury bills here currently are doing better than the S&P 500. 14.188% is better than the S&P 500. Even on this short treasury bill, 12.873% is better than the S&P 500, right? So it just depends on what you want to do, but it's for your base, right? This is not your end all be all. You're making all your money off that. This is the base money that keeps you going. All right. So can you say what the package costs? The package, like the basic package for laddering, Vision. Basic package for laddering is 75. If you want a trust to protect the laddering, it's 85. So that's your basic package, right? If you need a specific number every month, then we can calculate how much the package would be for you to get to that specific number. Oh, for everything? So the biggest, well, that's USD. Yeah, that's USD. Most of our clients are American or Canadian, and there's a few Brits. So those clients are typically immigrating over here, or they're expanding their businesses over here through not immigrant, I'm sorry, through investor permit. And so that initial thing is USD, and then we go ahead and convert everything and get everything set up for them. The problem with everything vision is like the house. Like, so for example, let me show you. Let me show you what I'm talking about. This is, I gotta move so you can see it. I hate that. Give me 1 second. Let me switch screen so you can see the full picture. That's one thing I dislike about the way TikTok does it, is the way it changes the photos. You can't really see the whole thing. And then this one isn't all that great anyway. But so this is one of the models of house that we build. This house is like 5,500 square feet. It's a big house, right? And this house costs like it's like $220,000, right? Now we have, let me see if I have those pictures in here. We have another, that's a 4-bedroom house, by the way. We have a 2-bedroom house with a library that could be, or an office that could be another bedroom, because the office is the same size as a master bedroom, and it has a bathroom already. But we have a 2-story, 2-bedroom house with an office. I'm trying to see if I have a picture of that one. That costs 170, right? So that price is different. You can also sit down with our architect and just build your house based on your budget, right? Let me see. That actually is the one that we're building now. All right, so I'll show you that. So this one on the bottom is a 3-bedroom rancher. That one costs 220. On the top is a family theater, and then you see there's some solar on the top. This is while it's under construction, so it looks a little whatever. Up here in the corner, right up here in this corner, is that 2-story, 2-bedroom with an office that I was talking about. So that one's under construction right now as well. So forgive me for the rough look, but you know, it is what it is. So that one costs 170. Now, remember when, I don't know if you were here, maybe you don't remember, but I was just talking about, for some people, we're like, look, get less house. Get your basic income going, because that's most important. Get less house, right? So, you know, what we've done with those folks is the smallest house that we've ever done was like 40,000, like maybe 42 or 45,000, right? So you work with the architect and you figure that out. Like, all right, I want this many bedrooms. All right, I don't care about a dining room. Maybe I'm okay with the kitchen, leading into the living room, or like whatever it is. I don't need an office. I don't need whatever. You figure that out to make it like fit your budget, if at all possible. There are folks that don't come with the base, but if you don't have the base, then the sword of Damocles is always hanging over your head. If anything goes wrong with whatever the source of your income is, you're screwed, and you're screwed in another country. If you set up the base, you're never screwed. You know what I mean? You always have the 100,000, the 150,000, the 50,000, whatever it is you need. You have that coming in every month, minimum, right? And again, if you just do the due diligence and look at all the bonds that came out this year, you'll see that no one is getting that minimum. There's no client that's actually getting the 50,000. They're all getting more than that, right? But that's where we want your budget to be, so that you're delightfully surprised with more money and not surprised with less money, right? So we always do a 10% base, even though there's never been a 10% bond, right? So for us, and with our recommendations, we typically recommend that to all of our clients as a priority. Not everyone listens, which is okay. You know what I mean? But the ones who do listen feel incredibly secure, and they always come back to us. They're like, thank you so much for, like, even though we wanted like our dream house and all that, thank you for telling us to go down on the house and do the bond laddering, which we make more money on the house, just putting that out there, right? We lose money when we tell you to get a smaller house and do the bond laddering, just letting it be known. But it's a better relationship. because most of those folks are looking for dual citizenship. Dual citizenship takes 7 years. We are in a 7 year relationship to get you to dual citizenship, right? So if I put you in a position where you fail before dual citizenship along those 7 years, just so I can make an extra 6% on construction, right? You know, what kind of failure am I setting my company up for? So it's better for us to make less money up front. You get a smaller house, but you have guaranteed income for 20 years and you're solid and you're secure. And then you can build, a monetary empire going from there. And then what happens? Like, let's just keep it all the way real, right? You come back to us when you need something else because we treated you right. You know what I mean? So it just makes more sense to do that. So you can sit down with our architect once you onboard, and you can have any level house you want designed, and then we'll go from there with it. Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We get it, man. Like, it's nerve wracking. You know what I mean? Like, I've been through it. That helps, right? So it's nerve wracking, and that's probably the one thing. Like, when people ask, like, what would you tell your younger self? That's the one thing I would have done with my younger self. I would have been like, do the bonds, do it immediately. Immediately do the bonds, and I would have went from there. I didn't know about it off the bat, right? So you don't know what you don't know. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. 175 should be good if you have a family of three or less. You know what I mean? Correct. We have our own GC, general contractor. We have our own architects. We have our own lawyers. So yeah, we have full vertical integration. So we're vertically integrated in everything that we need to process what it is that we do. Absolutely. Yeah, if it's just you, that house is a big, 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 big house. Like that, the one with the two bedrooms and the office is actually really big if it's 2 stories. Sometimes like folks like the single story. If you pay attention, let me bring that picture back up so you can see something. Okay. Where is the picture? You can get a solid size. Let me see how I'm going to show you this. Okay, yeah, let's show it to you this way. We built all of these buildings, right? So all of these buildings that I'm currently showing you, they're all construction sites for us. On the bottom here, now you're looking at the top. See that building that looks like it's tiny? It's not really tiny, but because it's a drone shot, that tiny one. Now on this road in the middle where everything is coming together, right? On the left side of that road where the tiny building is an eighth of an acre, right? Which is what that bigger building on the top is sitting on. That's an eighth of an acre. That's a 50 by 100. On the right side of that road is another 50 by 100. Now you can see that um, 2 bedroom with the office is small enough that two of them will fit on a 50 by 100 with a pool in the middle, right? Now at the top there, that's another 250 by 100s. And on the one side is a pool that we're building, and on the other side is a 6 bedroom duplex, right? So that just kind of gives you an idea of the size, of what those things look like. Yeah, Diego, sorry about that. You can only see on TikTok. So if you jump over to our TikTok, you'll be able to see the pictures that I'm showing. Unfortunately, I can't put up my hand and make a video pop up on YouTube. That functionality isn't there. Yeah, 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 yeah. You get a lot of space on a 50 by 100 with that particular build of house, especially with the 2 stories. Now, if we, there we go. Now, on this other one up here, that's a 3 bedroom house. The one that's like taking up almost all the space. So you see, there's a little bit of space behind over here where they can put a pool in the back there. but it seems like it's taking up all the space in the 50 by 100. So there's that front space where they have the basketball court and where the car parks, and then there's the back where the pool's going to go. They have a family theater on the roof, but that's all one level. So the roof is the only staircase in there, and that's 3 bedrooms, not 2, right? So that just kind of gives you, a bit of an understanding of like the size and how the sizes work. And again, I'm sorry for you guys on Fanbase and on YouTube for not being able to see that. Unfortunately, just don't have the ability to do that. At least not that I know of. If anybody knows of a way to do it on YouTube, just let me know. But I don't know how to do that on YouTube, and there's definitely no option on Fanbase. Yeah, definitely, bro. Definitely. Yeah, you be squared away with that for sure. These are all business accounts. So in the profile of the account should be, the information to reach out, email, website, that type of stuff. I think actually is is Fanbase might be the only one that's not a business account. I don't think there was an option to do. We on Fanbase for the culture. It's very rare. That's cool that we got a question on Fanbase. It's very rare that anyone engages in Fanbase, but we try to support. Yeah, Mac, we are here. Oh yeah, absolutely. So, well, I'll tell you what. We got a huge influx of bond ladder clients when what was it? The private equity groups, so like BlackRock, Vanguard, and all that, were buying single family homes. A lot of people had saved up 150, $200,000 to buy a home, and then here comes BlackRock and Vanguard making double asking offers, right, and buying up all the single family homes in the United States, which actually created a bit of a crisis. So a lot of those folks were like, well, screw it, we'll drop 175,000, we'll move to the beach in Kenya, live our best life on the beach, and have guaranteed passive income for the rest of our lives. Essentially, like it's 20 years. It's 20 years, but in those 20 years, if you're not setting yourself up, you're doing yourself a disservice, right? We don't know anybody who hasn't set themselves up in the first 5 years. You know what I mean? So you got 20 years where you don't have to worry about money. You should be able to make some really good decisions, right? All the excuses disappear, right? All the, when I work, my paycheck disappears automatic. All of that stuff is out the window now. Now you got guaranteed income coming in. You got your house, paid off. You own your land paid off. Those folks who want a car, they can, upgrade and get a car added on and have their car paid off and all of that. And so all the excuses go out the window, and there's nothing but opportunity. You know what I mean? And so then it's up to you to take advantage of that. Arc Pro, yeah. That fund was 60%. 60%. Let me see if I can get a picture of that and put that up for you guys because it's so unbelievable. Where is it? Mm, 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 mm. I'm looking through my emails here for earnings report. I should really prep this stuff in advance, huh? I didn't think we were talking about this today. I'm trying to get the right combination of search words for my Gmail. Here we go. Where is it? And we weren't in this at all. Sucks. They were a new bond. We're relatively cautious. That's why we weren't in it at all. But we were not involved in getting that 60%. Okay. It's ArvoCap. Let's see. I don't know if it's going to be backward. It is backwards. Is there anything I can do about that? Mirror your video. How about that? Can you see? Yeah, there we go. So it's ArvoCap. I'm going to show this one first. I know you probably can't see it on YouTube. I'm going to come to you in just a moment. So if you want to look it up, it's ArvoCap Thaimani Equity Fund. And they did 60.18% over the last 12 months. Imagine getting a 60% return on investment. That's crazy. I wish we were in on that. We were not in on that. I don't know. Again, the YouTube. I don't know if I can like flip like mirror my camera like I can on TikTok here, but you can obviously see it's 60.18%. That's what they did in the last 12 months. That does not mean that's what they're going to do in the next 12 months. So that sucks, right? That's the thing about investment. Past performance is not an indicator of future performance. so there's that. Now, some of our people did get that though, because if you order the trustee to make an investment, they'll make it. And so some of our folks did order their trustee, which is how it even came on our radar, did order the trustee to make that investment and they got 60%. So like, just think about that. 60% in a year. If you put $100,000 in there, you got $160,000 back, right? 60.18% actually, right? So yeah, that would be $160,180 back. There are fees. There were performance fees and brokerage fees and all of that stuff. But even so, it was like people were still getting like in the 40s, right? So still, you put up 160,000. They took their fees, which you're happy for them to take at that point, right? And you got $140,000 in 12 months. That's amazing, right? So there are some pretty cool investments out there, but all of that comes after your basic stuff is taken care of. Once you got that basic stuff taken care of, because you're bond laddering, and the government of Kenya is giving you that big check every month, then you can start looking at throwing the excess and stuff like this. So definitely Google Mansa X Fund. That's given about 20% return on investment. We don't own any of these funds, right? But Google them and do your research on Mansa X Fund. Research oak like an oak tree, oak special fund, and also research. It's ARVOCAP, right? So ARVOCAP equity fund. 60.18%. That's amazing. That's six times the S&P 500. Six times the S&P 500. 60.18% return on investment. It sounds like it's fake. I'm telling you, our lawyers jumped into this when some of our trust fund clients were like, yeah, and that was last February. Last February, there were all these buy orders for this thing, and everything was on when it came out. We were like, damn, we should have done 60.18%. ROI. That's really nuts, and that's gross. That's not the net. Like I said, there are fees and taxes and all that stuff or whatever. But it still ended up being like 40 something for the average, investor. Different people have different tax situations, so whatever. But that's amazing, right? That less if they keep that, it is risky. It is risky. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely risky. But man, that was a hell of a return. That's a hell of a return. Yeah, no, there's definitely been those. There's definitely historically, man. Bernie Madoff ran a Ponzi scheme for what? 40 years? 40 years? 30 years? It's crazy. The richest people in the world, like the Queen of England was in his Ponzi scheme. Like the richest people in the world were investing with this guy. It was nuts. So yeah, I mean, those things happen. But that's the whole point of having the bonds as your base. You know what I mean? Because then you're not wiped out if something goes wrong, later, or any of that. Now, Oak Special Fund is and Mansa X and even these guys are pretty solid. And what you look for as far as your due diligence is you want to see who's holding the funds, because what ends up taking place is they'll have an independent third party bank hold the funds, right? So their organization will not be holding the funds like Bernie Madoff. That's part of why Bernie Madoff was able to run his Ponzi scheme, because they were personally holding the funds. So the funds are end up managed independently through some other bank, right? I can't think of who it is for like Oak and Mansa and Alpha and all of that, but that's definitely one of the things that you want to look at right away. Is like, okay, where's the money being held? Um, and then go from there. So if it's internally, that's a bit of a red flag for me. you know, but yeah, definitely the bonds just have a 20-year base, and then figure out what your risk tolerance is. Most of you do not know what your risk tolerance is. You think you do, but it's based on your struggle, right? So it's your struggle tolerance. It's not really your risk tolerance. When money is no longer a factor, that's when you'll find out what your risk tolerance is. Any advice for anyone who wants to get on the bond laddering ASAP but may not have enough? Yeah, I mean, you can do it like little by little. Like, so for example, um, this bond that we were looking at, it's 21.8 years or left, or 21.3 or something like that, right? We typically say 20, right? And then there's like an average in there, right? So we typically say 20. And so because of that, you can go over a year, right? You can go under a year, and you can decide how quickly you get there. Obviously, the optimum way to do it is within 6 months, right? So that's obviously the optimum way to do it. And the reason why it's optimum is because everything else lines up. It takes us 7 to 9 months to build a house, right? Okay, I see you've come over here, Eddie. So it takes you 7 to 9 months to like build a house and all of that. So the optimum way is by the time your house is built, by the time you move over here, you have payments coming in every month. That's the optimum way to do it, right? Research Saiton high yield investment. Many aren't regulated like MMFs. Yeah, well, yeah, yeah. There's that. And I will look into that. Thanks for telling me that. And send me a personal message because I may not be able to find the comments later. Send me like a DM that has that, and I'll look that up. And so, Eddie, you that's the ideal way, but you can get started and go little by little. We've definitely had people who've been like, all right, I'm going to do one bond this year, right? So and then it becomes a matter of either you know we hope we make the best choice that we possibly can because we got one bite at the apple, right? And so where the buyer's remorse happens there is like last month. Last month, the highest bond I think was 13%. Well, this month there's a 14%. So if you're like, all right, I'm going to do this one bond at a time, right? The issue then becomes you can always use high. Oh, well, I could have got more on that other, but you know what I mean? Whereas if you get them all done in the same year, then you got the best of every month. So now there is no like buyer's remorse of like, oh, well, I could have, da, 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 right? And even there, a lot of times you're doing the first 6 months. So in the last 6 months, maybe something better will come up, and there's still, that little twinge of buyer's remorse, right? So that's what happens when you stretch it out. The other risk of stretching it out is that the bond yield will go back to like international norms before you're done getting all six of them. So then you're going to get one at like 9% or 8% because now the bond yield has gone back down, right? So there's 2 months that are giving you way less money than the others. Does that really matter? Typically not. You're typically not spending every penny, right? That might happen the first 2 or 3 months that you get paid, but then you like ease into what's going on and you start spending less and less and less. You start having a normal life, and there starts being savings, right? So typically those savings can kind of make up for the two bad months. Now we've never even been in that situation yet because the bonds haven't fallen out yet. But we estimate would take place, for those folks that are in that last group. But that time is coming. The time is coming now. We don't think it's going to come before 2027 because that's an election year, right? And that's going to be part of, the election claims. Look at the bond market. Look how good the economy is. Re-elect me for another term, right? So we think you have at least until then to get it done. But that's just a pure D assumption based on absolutely no evidence whatsoever, right? So that is not, a recommendation or a prediction because it's not based on anything other than we know that politicians like to make the government and the environment look real good right before an election. So we don't think the bonds are going to drop out before 2027, but it's just a wild guess. Better to have. Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely, for sure. Then 12 months, absolutely, 100%. Yep, 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 absolutely, 100%. And I have a guy who laddered over 6 years. Now that messed up his laddering, but this reopened bond, we actually bought that for him when it was open, right? So it took him a few years to get his stuff, but it kind of worked out because what ended up happening with him was every time is the max. 30 years is the max that the government releases here in Kenya. So when we saw that 25, that was able to align with some of the earlier bonds, right? So that's the only difference is when you really, really drag it out, then your stuff might end years apart, right? So you might have a period of 6 years where there's no money coming in for those 2 months, but that's still at the end of 20 years. So if you haven't done something in between the time you started and the time you ended, you know, And that guy actually got the 18.46% infrastructure bond because he'd been doing it so long. So he was able to purchase that bond when it came out, which is beautiful. That's 18.46% tax exempt. Ah, such a beautiful bond. That means every 3.8 years, your money doubles. I know that's right. If they reopen it, you'll hear about it. If they reopen it, that's the kind of auction that sells out in like 2 days. That's the other thing, is that liquidity sometimes matters, right? So when people come in and they buy the package, the liquidity is there because that money is put into a client account with the law firm. So the liquidity is there. So the day like the 18.46 opens, boom, we're on it, right? But if we got a call and be like, hey, 18.46 just opened, send $10,000, wire it quickly, we need to buy this, by the time the wire clears, it might be closed. Right? So it's one of those things where liquidity allows you to make ad hoc decisions. And those ad hoc decisions are the difference between success and failure. Yeah, everybody who was around for the 18.46 are loving that. And some of those people, they ended up, having a double up bond, right? So like if I buy a bond in, let's say, February, typically, now sometimes it doesn't work this way because of reopenings, right? But typically if it's a new bond, I buy it in February, the 2 months are January and June, right? So if I bought February and then I got January and June, and then in July the 18.46 opens, that means if I buy it, I'm going to get June and January. Right? But it was so good that even the people that was the outcome were like, screw it. We'll send more money to get the months that we're missing. You know what I mean? Get me that bond. So some people even ended up doubling up where like they get two payments in that month now because it was just so good that they wouldn't pass up on it. So yeah, we don't. I mean, there's no reason for us to expect it to go up. That was like the heyday. There's no reason for us to expect it to go back up that high. But anything is possible. Absolutely anything is possible. All right. So we covered what? We covered the topic for today, which was the permits. Got some questions about laddering, which makes sense because it's probably one of the most amazing services that we provide, and that's where we are right now. And it's been what? We're 2.5 hours in. All right, we're at that point. Are there any questions on anything? Um, TikTok is saying to tell your viewers to tap and share the live. So tap and share the live. Are there any questions up until this point? Thanks, Vision. Any questions on anything? Yes. Are you not seeing them? If you're not seeing them, and that's on YouTube, right? I never deal with YouTube directly, and I know the social media manager. Remember there was a live where you told me to like clip something. She went in to clip it, and like there was like a glitch in the video, so she wasn't actually able to clip that. But I know that particular video that live, it took 2 days to upload, and we don't know why. So sometimes, like as soon as we're done with the live, in like 30 minutes, it's there. Sometimes it's like 3 days until it's there. We're not sure what the discrepancy is. But yes, they start private though. So she goes in and does whatever, like edits. Like when I first go live and I'm just sitting here like with a water bottle, like, oh yeah, everybody's paddling it. Like she cuts that out, you know. And so she goes in and does whatever she has to do, and then she switches it from private to public. But yeah, they all will end up, you know, in the list, the video list. Yeah, but I will let her know. I know she's in the process of moving to a new house, so maybe there's some things falling through the cracks. This A lot of times we close in December, not because like people are moving houses and getting married and all that, but it's because the government closes in December. Everybody goes on their holidays and all of that, and so for certain things that like we can still do corporate structuring and all of that, but like we can't finish like a trust during the month of December. We can get it started, but we got to wait for the government officials to come back and sign off on everything in January. Same thing with immigration. We can get people in line and get it started, but they're definitely not going to get a permit in the month of December unless they started, in September, and they're getting it the first week of December. All the committees are gone. Like they're all on vacation now. So like if you want to transfer a piece of land, like if we're buying land for somebody, there's a land control board, right? That request has to go to, and they have to approve the transfer of that land. They're not meeting for the rest of the month of December. They're some of them are already out of the country visiting family, and going on vacation, right? So December is always this like ridiculous month where things start falling apart, and so sometimes we just close. We're like, look, we're not doing business for December. We'll see you guys in the new year. So December is always a little rough, but I'll definitely double check and make sure that she's on top of that. It used to annoy the hell out of me, but you just got to remember that it's like a different business norm, and so you got to get in where you fit in the Kenyan business scheme of things. All right. Any other questions for me today? Any other questions? If you're writing a question right now, just hit enter and then go back and fix whatever comes up. I'll wait for you to finish writing it, or hit a one if you just thought about a question and you need time to write it, and I'll wait for you. If not, then I guess we are done today. Oh, special beads. Oh, special needs. Oh, yes. Okay, that was your friend. Okay, yeah, I did see her. Yeah, that's cool. That's really, really cool. And I might, you know what? I might be able to ask some questions and get like some deeper information. There's an orphanage that we support, and I feel like that orphanage has special need kids. Like maybe that's even why they're orphans. Like special need kids get abandoned, and then the orphanage like goes picks them up. Let me see what they have to say about that, and see if I can get deeper information for you or for your friend. Okay. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Yeah, she seemed pretty cool. King's mama, I think it was. All right. Yeah, yeah, for sure. All right, guys. Last call. Any other questions? All right. Looks like we're good to go, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me as always. I will see you tomorrow right around the same time. And yeah, have fun out there. Chase your freedom. Don't be afraid. Chase your freedom. All right, guys. Talk to you later.